Let's make a start on tonight's webinar. If you do have any issues during the session, we will be using a little chat box down the left-hand side. So please feel free to put any questions or comments that you have or issues down the left-hand side. The session is being recorded, so we do hope to make sure that there's a recording available from the ISACA website within the next day or two. Tonight's session will last approximately 90 minutes, an hour and a half. We're going to take you through a webcram. We're going to try to make sure that we assist you in any way we can to help you get that first time exam pass on the 13th. And I hope you're not superstitious with the exam being on the 13th. Lucky it's not a Friday. Okay, folks, let's go in and start tonight's session. So what we're really going to do is cover some of the commonality, some of the exam question techniques, what to expect in the day. We're going to fit into 90 minutes a little webcram on passing the exam. My name is Sean Hanna. I'm a GRC and cyber warfare consultant. I am a consultant working out of Belfast. I also sit on the ISACA Ireland board, and I would be their academic liaison. Okay, so this is ISACA. It's a not-for-profit institution for the benefit of its members, and we believe in trying to make sure that your membership, your sponsorship is returned back to the members. So we try to make sure we organize sessions like this. We do an annual conference. We try to do bi-monthly update and training sessions throughout the year, and all of this would be free of charge to ISACA members. So as ISACA members, when you pass the exam, we do hope that you'll be getting involved in some of the other sessions and some of the other presentations we do. All our presentations are vendor agnostic. You won't find me trying to sell you anything tonight or to offer you any services. Okay, so ISACA, very proud to be a member of it, very happy to be involved. So let's go ahead and make a start tonight. So what I'm attempting to do is try to get an understanding of the commonality between CISM and CISA, and then the individual types of questions. Now, there's no way can we teach you how to pass a CISA or CISM in a 90-minute session. Well, who would want an accreditation you could learn to pass in 90 minutes? I'm sure some of you at this stage of your study wish you could, but that's not a reality. So what can I do? Well, what I'm going to try to do is to give you what I would consider to be some of the founding principles of the exam. There are some themes that run through both CISM and CISA. We'll cover those first. And then there's some specific things that we want you to know. There's some, I call them back pocket techniques. Some tools that you can sort of put away in your back pocket. And when you get stuck in those ambiguous, difficult ISACA questions, you're able to pull them out. Little rules that you can apply to scenarios and situations that help you answer them to get the mark on the exam. So I always put to people that CISA and CISM are not actually that terribly different. They're actually part of one process, and that's the first process we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about ISGRC. CISM is really the department manager. They implement, they manage, they're involved with executive decisions, they deploy business tools, they are control experts. CISAs come in as auditors to audit the function that the CISM delivers. The audit function is all about delivering assurance, confidence to senior management that their strategies are going to be implemented, and a contribution for the IS is to help deliver the business objectives. So very much two sides of the one coin, and we're going to look at first of all the commonality between them, and then we'll look at each one in turn. CISA first, CISM next. So what sort of generic topics? Well, I actually think that you can come up with a list that covers both exams. We've got the three biggies: governance, risk, and compliance. I mean, both of these exams, and actually all four of the ISACA exams, are really based on the simple principles of governance, risk and compliance. And the first part of tonight will concentrate, we'll do a deep dive on those topics. Of course, ISACA are famous for developing, industry-aware, practical frameworks to help us manage and implement this. ISACA is full of consultants, full of managers, full of audits, just like ourselves. We don't really employ academics and ivory towers to create remote artificial standards and processes for us. All the things within ISACA are the contribution of the 110,000 members. As a member of ISACA, you contribute to the frameworks that we have. And the two big ones are definitely COBIT and ITAF. COBIT is the control objectives for IT. It's almost like the sacred object, the holy relic that we have in this cult called ISACA. COBIT is something that we very much believe in. It's something that delivers IS governance, risk and compliance in a variety of different public sector and private sector environments. ITAF actually came before COBIT. ITAF is the audit framework. ITAF is, and ISACA is predominantly an audit organization. So auditing is at the core of what we believe in, and ITAF is your IT audit framework. It gives you the principles, the standards, the rules and methods, the tools that you need to be able to go out and measure IS governance, risk and compliance. There's an awful focus on business across the two domains. We do believe that you need to be technical. We do believe that an IS or an IS auditor needs to understand the technical controls and information security. But if we only understood what was technical, if we only understood information security, then we wouldn't be an IS department. We'd be an IT department. IT is where we keep our technical expertise. We are information systems assurance. We're very business focused. We use many different business tools, and you're going to find tonight that business tools are maybe 30–40% of what you're going to get examined on. All the technical stuff we were talking about, we can summarize that with one single word: controls. We implement controls to mitigate risk using a strategy, a roadmap, a framework, a process, if you like. We implement a process in the business, and we implement controls to protect the business, to manage risk to acceptable levels. The controls are wide-ranging. To understand network controls, IDSs and firewalls, you need a basic understanding of TCP/IP networking. To understand things like access controls as they apply to a server, then you need a really good understanding of server and desktop computing. To understand control risks like cross-site scripts and buffer overflows, we need a good understanding of the technical domain of hacking. So controls, it's a brilliant word. Controls protect the business, reduce risk, mitigate to an acceptable level. But when you're up against an exam, controls are wide-ranging across so many different topic areas, and some of them are really quite technically challenging. So, basic overview to start with. Once you know the commonality, the common basics, the things that ISACA expect everybody to know about: project management, risk management, business management, setting strategy, doing measurements, the things that are the common basics, then and only then I believe you can actually go in and look at the unique requirements of each exam. So if you're doing a CISM this time, I would strongly recommend that you should be aiming for December for your CISA. And if you're doing CISA, vice versa, I think you should be aiming for December for your CISM. Why? Well, if you do one of the two accreditations, you have covered at least 50% of the other. There is a 50% overlap. And that means I can start with the overlap. And the most important overlap has to be GRC, or in our specific case, ISACA GRC, Information Systems, Information Security Governance. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a quick peek at this one. So let's start off doing the deep dive with some nice, easy questions. Well, have you looked at any exam questions yet? Compared to an ISACA exam question, this is clear and easy. Look, what we're trying to do is to understand the business, understanding business methodologies, and using that to answer questions. So governance. Now, I'm not talking about IS governance, I'm not talking about IT governance, I'm not talking about security governance, I'm talking about corporate governance. So what actually is it? It's a very ambiguous term. I always think that the best way to answer it is start at the bottom and work your way up. And the bottom question is who owns it? And that is a nice, easy answer. We define two types of management within a business: executive management and functional management. Functional management do a job. They're a head of a department, departmental manager, a manager. They do a job, they operate a process, they're responsible for staff, systems, they have business objectives to deliver. Executive management, or the senior management team, they set the objectives, they decide the direction, they decide the strategy that we will use to deliver business results. The executive senior management team own and are both accountable and responsible for information governance. So owning it is always the guys at the top. Nobody else in an organization can be made accountable for governance. It's a requirement, a legal mandate for the senior executive team. Where does it come from? Well, it's an interesting question. Corporate governance is not always something that your senior team wants to do. It's something really they have to do. There are legal, regulatory, and compliance requirements in virtually all the 157 countries signed up to the CISA agreement. Okay, so most of the major economies in the world, 157 of them, all require corporate governance of directors of businesses. And you can summarize that requirement by simply saying doing what is reasonable. As a director of a company, I am legally bound to do what is reasonable, for the company, the stakeholders, the shareholders. I should not act in my own best interest. I should always act in the best interest of the business as a whole. For example, I run my own little business. If I approached the bank for a £1 million bank loan because I had a really good business plan, what's to stop me as a director of the company paying myself immediately a £1 million bonus? You see, that's not reasonable. My remuneration needs to be reasonable to the capital expenditure, the profitability, the total capital value of my company, my turnover. Because my turnover in my company, unfortunately, is not $1 million a year, it would be definitely unreasonable. It would be a criminal act to act in my own best interest by giving myself a $1 million bonus after getting a loan from the bank. Corporate governance. The ability to make sure that the decisions in an organization that are made by the top are reasonable, and that those decisions are followed by other departments and functions within the business. Governance is what we call hands-off management. We have a detachment between the people that set objectives and the people that deliver objectives. I usually think nautical examples work quite well for this one. So, we're on a cruise liner. We're on a cruise liner that's going to be departing Belfast, picking passengers up in Dublin, and sailing around the Mediterranean.
Seen something here.
If I'm the captain of that,
What do you want to do?
and you are my managers, my
Put on too loud and you'll be harsh.
my pilot, my head of the engine room, my chief in the camp catering department, if you are my managers within that ship, I am the governance entity. I set your strategic objectives, and then I let you go off and decide how to deliver them. I say to the wheelhouse, we're going to sail out of Belfast at 8 o'clock tonight. We want to be in Dublin 4 hours later. We'd really like to be departing Dublin 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. When we depart Dublin on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, I would like to be docked in Barcelona, our first port of call in the Med, 24 hours later, 9 o'clock on Friday morning. Okay, so, somebody's just there commenting if you could mute your mics if at all possible. I've got no option to mute all your mics. If I went through the 26 participants, I would have to do it individually. So if you do have a microphone on, if you wouldn't mind, please do mute your mic. Thanks for that one. Okay, so we were saying, I set your objectives. I tell you we'll be leaving Belfast, what time we're going to arrive in Dublin, and when we want to be in Barcelona. And I make it your job in the wheelhouse to deliver that. I go to the head of the engine room, my engine room manager. And I go to my chief engineer and I say to him, last time we did 34% fuel efficiency. I'm going to target you on this trip to be 35% efficient, and I want to increase the engine uptime from 4 nines to 5 nines. So from 99.99% uptime, which we achieved in the last journey, I want to make sure that our engines and systems are available 99.999%. I want to increase the uptime. That's your objective. Go and do it for me. I go to the catering manager and I say, right, on the last trip you achieved 87% customer satisfaction on the food that we offered. I'd like to see you hit 90% on this trip, but I'm reducing your budget for raw ingredients by 1%. So I want you to achieve a higher quality, a higher satisfaction, but I'm still going to reduce your budget. You see, I don't go in and tell the catering manager how to deliver that. I don't tell the catering manager how many eggs they're going to need for this trip. I don't tell the catering manager where's the best place to buy eggs. Do we buy them all in Belfast? Do we buy some Belfast and Dublin? Is Barcelona the cheapest place in Europe to buy eggs? I don't care. It's not my job. I've set you an objective. It's up to you to go with your team and take my objective and implement it. This is a corporate governance model. The senior team is all about strategy and objectives, and we then delegate the delivery of that to our functional business units. All you can ever do as a functional business unit is deliver my strategy. If you can't deliver my strategy, you must come back to me. We're sailing out of Dublin. We're heading down towards France to sail along the coast. There's a storm in the Bay of Biscay. The storm in the Bay of Biscay is a force 8. We're going to be going into strong headwinds. That gives us a big problem. Because if we're going to go straight through the storm and the wheelhouse is going to achieve its objective of arriving in Barcelona at 9 o'clock on Friday morning, then we're going to have to put the foot down. We're going to have to increase engine speed to compensate from the headlong winds. But if we do that, then the wheelhouse meets its objective, but the engine room doesn't meet its objective. The engine room's objective was to be more fuel efficient. If they have to burn more diesel because we're going into headwinds, they're going to use more fuel. The engine room would prefer us to go around the storm. By going around the storm, we're going to maintain the same level of efficiency, but it's going to mean that our journey is much longer and the wheelhouse doesn't achieve its objective. When you get a collision in objectives like that, the only people that can make a decision are the ones that set our objectives. The senior management team, the executive body, the governance entity. They're the same thing. So if we ever get a collision in governance, we can't make our mind up. We were given our strategic objectives. If our strategic objectives cannot be delivered, or there's a collision between different objectives within the one organization, we cannot decide what to do. We go back to the governance entity. You see, this is a hands-off management approach. We rely and trust our functional business unit to deliver. But there's a bit of a problem. Risk. There's a great deal of risk with our functional business unit delivering our business objective. And we must make sure that we have done everything possible to meet our stakeholders' needs. Our stakeholders are represented by the strategic objectives that we've been assigned. There's a risk that we will not deliver. So we must make sure there's a clear process that we can follow that allows us to bring that risk, to quantify it, to reduce it where necessary, to bring it under control, to bring it into acceptable levels. So risk is owned by anybody in the business who owns a system, who owns a piece of data, who owns a process. Risk is inherent. When we get a set of objectives to deliver, no matter what those objectives are, there will always be a level of risk, a level that we may not, a probability, that we may not deliver what we're supposed to deliver on time, on budget. So risk is a way of managing the uncertainty of delivering an objective. Now, you notice at this stage, we're not talking about information security. We're not talking about IT. We're only talking about general business principles. Our risk is very specific. Data, data systems, and data infrastructure, DS&I. But we're not inventing this model. We don't invent risk management within a business. The business, the core of the business, the core of any business, the core of all business is supposed to be risk management. At the heart of any business is the concept to get a reward, you must take a risk. A risk is worth taking if the reward is big enough. With risk comes reward. And that's the very principle in any business model. I used to work for BT. I had a job for life. I was in BT 13 years. I decided to leave BT at the start of a recession. I left BT to form my own business at the start of a recession, 2009. I took a big risk, but the risk I took was a calculated risk. A risk that was calculated and balanced with the rewards that were in offer. You see, we shouldn't be introducing the business to risk management. That's not our job. Risk management is supposed to be something that the business already does. It does it on every process, and we extend that into ITIS. The final little bit here is what happens if we don't want to do it? What happens if we don't like governance? What happens if we just don't do risk? Well, compliance comes in. This is not really optional. You know, for a vast majority of businesses in a vast majority of countries, we have many compliance requirements. These compliance requirements are the law or regulations in those countries that insist that directors do governance, that we should manage a business on the principles of risk, that we must be compliant with the law. So even if this is something that the business is hesitant to do, very much you can always go back to the law, because the law requires us to do an awful lot of this. And we'll talk more about that in a little second. That was GRC. Now, we've talked about them, but I've got a little diagram. A little diagram I'm really quite proud of. It's this diagram. Have a look at it. Compliance leads to governance. which leads to risk. Compliance has two parts to it: implicit compliance and explicit compliance. Implicit compliance are things that are very fuzzy, very woolly, they're not written down clearly, they're implied. Due care and due diligence. Due care and due diligence is really doing what is reasonable. It's a business being able to do what is reasonable and prove they've done what is reasonable. It's an implicit requirement. As a director, I must do what is reasonable and act reasonably on behalf of the business and stakeholders at all times. That is due care and due diligence. Due care and due diligence that are implicit have to be argued out in court. The only people who make money off implicit regulation are solicitors and barristers. So a lot of the time we take those implicit requirements and we write them down, we make them very well defined, we make them explicit. When we take due care and due diligence and make it explicit, it becomes law and regulation. Compliance is doing the things that we have to do to operate in that jurisdiction. The business really has to be compliant, so we always say a business objective is compliance. Compliance requires the business to do what is reasonable. We do what is reasonable by implementing an executive management-led governance practice. The executive management are both accountable and responsible for the governance of a business. That means that they set objectives that must be delivered according to the law and according to due care and due diligence. Because this is compliance, compliance means that we might, just might at some stage, end up in a courtroom. So we need a way to prove that what we're doing is reasonable. How do we prove what we're doing is reasonable? We use risk, the principles of risk management. So risk management is the ability to write down, to look at the risks and the rewards of delivering objectives and to see how likely it is we will succeed or fail. Risk management delivers us evidence that governance has been done correctly, and it delivers the senior managers assurance, confidence if you like, confidence that their corporate objectives are going to be delivered. Okay, so you get this really nice flow between compliance requiring governance and governance requiring risk. There's something called system thinking. System thinking is an exam topic on ISACA. System thinking is something we all are used doing. It's the old sort of saying, more than the sum of its parts. So you see, compliance is one thing, governance is one thing, risk is one thing. But when you put the three of them together, you get something brand new. GRC is not really a TLA. It is something by itself. GRC as a concept lives by itself with the three things tied together. When you take them individually, they mean less, they don't mean the same thing. Governance, risk, and compliance. Governance, risk, and compliance make up the responsibilities of the senior management team. They are accountable. It's the duty of them to understand the GRC within their environment. Our GRC is but one form. It is no more important. It is no less important. Our form of GRC, we look at data, data systems, and data infrastructure. And everything, and I do mean everything that might impact D, S, or I. You see, we cannot secure the business. We know that. Securing the business to me means zero risk. And we know risk is inherent, and we know that zero risk is almost an impossibility to achieve in a real life environment. So if we can't do zero risk, then we have to look for direction, for strategy on what to do. We can't fix security. See, I always think that if you give security to an IT team, they'll try to fix it. An IT team is very binary. They're black and white, on and off, 1 or 0. In governance, risk and compliance, we're in a quasi-state. We would like to have 0 risk, but we can't accept 100% risk. So we're never going to be in 0 or 1. We're going to be somewhere in the middle. We're in a quasi-state. Because we're in a quasi-state, we need careful direction, careful budgeting. We need to know what to do and how much to spend on it. The senior managers are there to understand the business requirements, goals and risks. So they provide us the strategy and direction of what we should do in order to manage risk. They always retain the sponsorship and they always retain ownership of the budget. And they must provide oversight and control of the process. So they set our objectives. Now, I know you think that the senior management team may not clearly set objectives, but the business objectives, the business risk appetite, the business objectives are what we take our strategy from. So there's a little bit of reading between the lines to get this to happen, but we must follow the senior management team's, executive management's overall strategic objectives. You see, senior managers own all GRC within the business, therefore it flows on that they most definitely own GRC. Now, to present a session like this, I have to reduce an awful lot of complex material into some simple ideas. It's called reductionism. And when you distill an idea into its very essence, you do lose some details. So when I'm going through this, I'm presenting one view from it, and I'm trying to make it as short, as simple as possible. ISACA and COBIT do not dictate any type of organizational structure. We give you some guiding principles, some rules you can follow, but we do not ever say this is how your organization must be configured, must be structured. So when I give you a model for ownership, so we're going to give you a organizational structure, it makes it handy on the exam not to work for who you're working for. You don't work for your current employer. You work for acme.com. Acme.com is a multinational American company, and this is the structure that acme.com has. Does this make sense? The structure puts senior management in the center of everything that happens. And the way that we implement the governance program is via policy. Senior managers set our strategic objective by signing off, sponsoring, agreeing to policy. Policies are high-arching statements. Policies are overarching, high-up statements. They should be short. They should be concise. A policy statement to me is a paragraph, 2 paragraphs at max. Policies are regularly reviewed, but they're infrequently changed. Policies should be open to interpretation, so there's always wiggle room. You see, as technology changes rapidly, we do not want to have to update policy. If your policy was clear enough about data and laptops and mobile computing, then you shouldn't really need a separate policy for tablets or mobile phones. Your policy should be generic enough to apply to all mobile computing. So very high up, senior managers own them. Policies are what we must implement within the business. The policy might be something like, the organization provides the internet for business use. All personal use is optional and is subject to terms and conditions. The business expects each user to use the internet in a responsible way and not to do things on the internet, to download, look up websites or topics that may be found to be offensive. Offensive topics may include, among others, violence, sexism, racism, etc. So the policy is very general, very open to interpretation. We're saying the internet is going to be filtered. You have to subject yourself to those filters. It's really there for business purposes. All personal use is optional. You see, what do we mean when we say offensive? What is offensive? If I take violence or if I take racism, what part of that is actually really offensive? If I go to you and suggest on your internet we ban all racism, well, that sounds like a brilliant idea. Racism is something that we cannot entertain, that should be stamped out. However, by banning all racism for the internet, you may have inadvertently blocked somebody who is a victim of racism seeking help on the internet. You see, you just blocked all racism. So what we need is some way to make this much clearer. We need some way to sort of standardize the answer that we have. Policies are so general that what we need is a way to standardize the answer. Policies are made more clear, more defined, more specific in a standard. Standards are things like www consortium. Anyone remember the W3C? The W3C is an internet content rating organization. It rates the contents of websites for things like sexism, racism, violence, etc. It uses a sliding scale between 0 and 5. 0 is absolutely none, 5 is anything goes. If we take violence to say we want to ban violence from the internet and the intranet, well then, what have you done? You've banned Tom and Jerry, you've banned The Simpsons, you've banned the BBC News website, you've banned all sporting events. Is that really what you wanted to filter on the internet? If we go into the standard, we now get 5 choices. 0 means, no violence. 1 might mean cartoon violence. 2, documentary and news violence. 3, sporting violence. 4, violent movies rated 18. And 5, my favourite, wanton and gratuitous bloody gore. They do have a sense of humour. Okay, so the idea is that we can now go down to a standard and we can say, for internet filtering, we're going to use www consortium, and for violence, we're at 3. Racism, we're at 2. Sex and nudity, we're at 1. We get to define very clear, standardized meanings of the policy. That's the role of the IS department, the ISM. The standards give us the controls that we need. But standards, they're very hard to read. If I give it to a user and say, here you go, you're allowed violence level 2. I mean, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to a user. I'm allowed violence level 2. So what we need to do is we need to have a soft, fluffy, helpful document. Policies give rise to standards. Standards define what's required by a policy. To help people understand and use a standard, we provide guidelines. Guidelines are soft, fluffy documents that help us implement standards. We might have several standards, but we definitely should have several guidelines. The guidelines need to be specific for a specific user community. Guidelines for technical people need to be different than for the end user. Guidelines for senior managers need to be different than functional managers. So we may need several guideline documents to help people understand what the very cold, factual standards actually mean. Policies give rise to standards. Standards, we produce helpful documents called guidelines to help people interpret them. And then guidelines are finally implemented using detailed step-by-step procedures. And of course, ITIL Service Desk is really good at the procedure part of it, the step-by-step. The procedures are really the implementers, the step-by-step instructions on how to specifically carry out a standard requirement. Policy, standard, guideline, procedure, in that order. That's how we attempt to give senior management ownership, because they set the policy, we write the standard and guideline, and we give the policy, standard and guideline over to the implementation team, normally the IT team, to implement those requirements. So, project management slide coming up. As they would cover in every project management course, to succeed at anything, you must actually know what you're aiming for. You must be able to know when you've achieved it, and you must know that your measures of achievement are real. So if we're going to do policy, standard, guideline, procedure, we're going to need some way of measuring how well we've done it, how successful we've been. So again, we've got a different process. We put SMT in the middle, and the first thing we get is policy plus standard plus guideline equals controls. Controls come from standards, really. Standards come from policy, and guidelines help people. So controls are really defined in our standards documentation. These are things that we put in to manage risk. If we have a high risk appetite, our controls might be quite lax. We're willing to take a great deal of risk to reduce cost and make the system more flexible. If we live in a low risk environment, a low risk appetite environment, then we're not willing to take those risks, so our controls might be many and might be tight. To measure the success of a control, we really need an independent verification that it exists. Remember, controls are not going to make risk zero, because risk isn't zero. There is still a probability that we'll have an incident, we'll have a compromise, we'll have a control failure. So to measure how well we're doing controls, we call in an audit. Audits measure controls. They measure how well they've been implemented, how well the process works, how effective they are. We audit the control list. Audits produce evidence on the controls, and we report the evidence via an aggregated summary. An aggregated summary of an audit is called a dashboard. Controls are audited. Audits are reported to senior managers on their dashboards. The dashboards tell the senior managers if their strategies and policies are being delivered. Control plus audit plus dashboard equals, well, why do senior managers want this process? Because they require assurance. You see, senior managers are always ultimately accountable and ultimately responsible. You're also, a lot of the time, legally accountable and legally responsible. So if this is down on your head, then we better gather lots of evidence that you have created a business and a process within the business that allows everybody in the organization to follow your guidance. You need assurance that your business objectives are going to be delivered, and we're going to manage the risks that may prevent us delivering those business objectives. Take a think about that little boat that had a small accident in the Mediterranean just off Italy. What was it called? The Concordia. The Concordia had a little minor mishap as they did a handbrake turn down outside Italy. And they hit a bit of a rock, sunk the boat, lost lives. They killed people. The captain of the Concordia was in court for the past year or so, and he was accused, really, of corporate manslaughter. The defence that he gave, I did not understand. His defence was really based, as far as I can see, around the fact I wasn't steering the boat when it hit, therefore I'm not responsible or accountable for the deaths. The court disagreed. The court said that the captain of the boat is the governance entity. It is his responsibility and accountability to build a system that delivers the strategic objectives and delivers due care and due diligence to the health and safety of his passengers. The captain of the Concordia regularly flouted the policies of the business. He invited people onto the boat that were not registered, and he regularly broke company policy. He set the tone. If your senior director breaches policy, goes against objectives, then everybody else looks at it and says, well, if he can do it, so can we. Once one senior manager no longer implements the policies of the organization, then it's reasonable to expect other people to follow suit. Other people breach the health and safety regulations, the guidelines of how close a ship should sail to any object, because they've seen the captain setting the example. Therefore, he became compliant in the deaths of the people on the boat. If the captain of the Concordia had a good assurance program, he could have produced evidence that there was a process that should be followed, that the process was real, that the business was doing everything possible to enforce the process, and he could have produced evidence that I suggest might have found him innocent, because people can make mistakes, and if a pilot had have made a mistake that caused the crash, you cannot hold the captain responsible. But it was a breakdown in the very process, and the captain could provide no evidence that his system was fit for purpose with regard to the health and safety, due care and due diligence of the passengers. This is the structure of the business that you work in now. When you're sitting in the exam, this is acme.com. Acme.com builds itself on the senior management team. It implements its IS using three distinct functions: a steering function, a committee function, and an audit function. The IS steering committee advises the senior management team on IS strategy, on IS policies. It recommends and helps the senior managers, supports the senior managers on the strategic decisions and the policy decisions for the business. The senior management team never deliver anything. Well, apart from around the Gulf occasionally. The senior management team decide things should be done, and they delegate them to other people. The entity they delegate them to is the IS committee. The IS committee is responsible for implementing the policies and strategic decisions of the senior management team. The IS committee uses normal program and project management to deliver it. So we divide the work up into units using a work breakdown and object breakdown structure. And we implement the work as a number of projects inside a program environment. The functional business units are the people who actually have to change things on the ground. Project uses functional business people to create virtual teams to deliver business results. You'll notice I've put the IT department down as just another FBU. So according to the structure, it's just another functional business unit like marketing, sales, or HR. When all of that is happening, we need an audit function. The audit function audits the policies, standards, the guidelines and procedures. It audits all the controls and gives an independent opinion on are the controls being implemented, and if the controls are being implemented correctly, are they managing risk in a way that's compliant with the risk appetite of the business? The audit function provides the assurance. We don't say in ISACA that you have to use this structure. I'm trying to distill the essence of the exam into things that are easy to remember. Trust me, this is the company you work for. So if you need to apply knowledge to an exam question, because your exam questions are going to be very real life, they're supposed to represent real life questions. This is the structure of the business you have. All these elements work together. Acme.com has deep pockets. Acme.com always does everything correctly. One of the biggest hits and tips I can give you, you don't work for your current employer. Do not apply the questions to your own work environment, because your work environment won't be a utopian ISACA COVID environment. So, what we've done so far in the first 52 minutes of tonight's session is we've tried to look at one of the most essential common areas of the exam. GRC equally applies to CISA CISM. By the way, it equally applies to CGEIT and C-Risk as well. There are some common other areas, or some other common areas as well. These are CISM and CISA common areas. So I was trying to work out a bit of a graphic, and I know some people might disagree with this, but I think you can nearly fit all the exam knowledge into 3 separate domains: business, technology, and information security. You'll notice that I've deliberately made the biggest one business. We are a uniquely focused business accreditation and business focused information security organization. We're all about making sure the business succeeds, and most of the questions, you know, I was talking this over with a class that I'm delivering in Dublin this week, actually on the CISM, and we reckon 40 to 50% of questions come out of the business domain. So if you're expecting a technology exam, you are way far off the mark. We absolutely need to understand technology, and we absolutely need to understand information security. But we've got other people that can do that. We have other experts who specialize in just technology. We have other experts who specialize just in information security. Who specializes, who brings the all 3 parts together? We do. So, I've taken that and I've split that down to 3 slides. These are absolutely essential topics for you to be confident on to take this exam and succeed. There are a huge number of business tools. We need to understand strategic objectives and strategic planning and how strategy delivers results. We need to understand roadmaps and business plans, and how we take a strategy and turn it into a roadmap, and how we turn a roadmap into a business plan that can be delivered. These are the business tools that we very much need to understand. We also get very specific tools. Gap analysis, the ability to take a snapshot of the future, compare it to where we are today, break down the things we have to do to get to that snapshot, and create a plan to deliver it. Gap analysis is virtually the first thing we do at the start of every process within ISACA. CMM, the Capability Maturity Model, it's a business continuous improvement lifecycle. CMM, again, nothing really to do with us as in terms of IS, but it's a business tool that requires continuous improvement. It's your 5 levels, your ad hoc, your manageable but repeatable, your intuitive, your 5 different levels of CMM. Balanced scorecard, another business tool. Anything that we're going to do in ISACA, we have to measure it. Okay, remember, ISACA is predominantly an audit organization, and there's nothing that makes an auditor happier than being able to measure the evidence of a result. So a balanced scorecard is a measurement tool. It's a way to measure things that are really hard to measure. What sort of things? Governance and strategy objectives. How do you measure strategic achievement? Well, we'd use a balanced scorecard. Now, these things are all covered in ISACA material, but do you see business tools like this? Wikipedia. I'd strongly suggest that you stick each one of these into Google and you stick the word wiki in behind it and you have a read over the Wikipedia definitions. The Wikipedia definitions are the very much the definitions you need, that level of detail. Look at what I've stuck at the bottom. Project management, that's a specialism within a business. Risk management, that's a specialism within a business. Assurance processes, those are specialism. We want you to be a jack of all trades, but a master of information security. That's really what we're trying to get you to do. So these are all absolutely vital topics. We don't need to know an awful lot of detail, but we do need to know a very wide range of topics. So within project management, it's the real basics. We start a project with a PID, we do a risk assessment, a project is based on a cost-benefit analysis and initialized by a business case. We break it down into a work breakdown structure, an object breakdown structure. We deliver it against a Gantt chart, usually a process, and we measure at each step in the Gantt chart, each process that we deliver, we make sure that the objectives are still going to be met, that the cost-benefit still makes sense, and we're on time, on budget to deliver. There's project management in 60 seconds. You know, people specialize in project management. There's an awful lot of skills and expertise, but what we need to know about is really 60 seconds on it. Does that make sense? So, last one there is assurance process. Doesn't matter if you're doing the audit exam or not. We need to know about general audit principles. What is assurance within the business? How does it work? Okay, quality assurance, business process assurance. There's lots and lots of different assurance processes. That's just one of 3 domains. Next domain, technology. Again, we need to be a jack of all trades. We don't really need to be a master of any. We're not asking you to do a TCP/IP calculation. We're not asking you to write code. But you must understand TCP/IP and the OSI 7 layer model. You must understand code development, the methods, the problems, the controls. There's a lifetime of knowledge in there. If you come from a technology background, you probably have enough. But if technology is one of your weak areas, definitely something you might want to concentrate on. Information security, I've sort of cheated on this one because the information security domain is really the reason why you need to understand technology. If I want to understand a firewall, which is a control, I must first of all understand networking. That's why we need to understand the technology. It's not the technology to implement a network, it's the technology to allow me to assess a control, to design a control, to go and put a control in the right place architecturally. How can I describe the controls? It's wide, it's sometimes deep. The best way I can think of doing it is to sort of plug another vendor's accreditation. Look, we all know what a CISSP is, Certified Information Security Professional. It's a separate accreditation by a different body, and it concentrates on controls. And the controls that we need to understand are really roughly equivalent to the entire control base within a CISSP. So, little hint and tip, if controls and technology are not your thing, if that's your weak area, a CISSP book, some CISSP revision material makes a great study aid. Now, I would give you a health warning. We need to know the same number of controls, but we don't need to know the same level of detail. So, personal opinion, I don't think in ISACA exams we go to the same technical detail as they might do in a CISSP, but we definitely need to understand the same breadth of controls. So the same breadth, not very much detail. Happy enough with that? So, control example, look at a CISP outline, a CISP book, a CISP topic. If you Google it, you should find lots of support. If this is a weak area, strongly recommend a quick revision over controls using CISP. Okay. Let me just grab a glass of water. We are in 1 hour 2 minutes to the session. We have got about 28 minutes left. What we've done so far is try to cover the most important stuff. The things that are in common, the same between both CISA and CISM. All the stuff that we've done so far is useful to both sides. It now has to get a little bit different. If you like, it's CISA versus CISM. There's a lot of commonality, but there's also a lot of difference. Well, if there was no difference, we'd just have one exam. Okay, 50% I think's the same. That does mean 50% is different. So CISA first of all. So what specifically is the CISA exam asking you to prove? Well, CISA is all about audit. It's trying to let you prove that you're an auditor with 5 years experience within ISIT audit. That's really what the audit exam is about. Can you prove you have about 5 years knowledge of the ISIT audit process? That means we're going to do things like audit principles, using governance for business management, risk management during development and acquisition, risk during operational life cycle, and understand the vast variety of controls that we have across all those areas. Should I say this? Oh, I think I should say it. Might make half the audience happy. Personal opinion, CISA is more difficult than CISM. Because CISA requires us to know virtually everything that a CISM knows, plus a whole load extra. Don't forget, in an ISACA viewpoint, it's the auditor that must have an opinion on how well the CISM and the CISM process is controlling security and offering protection, value for money, and risk management to the business. So if you're going to offer an opinion on me, then you will need to know a little bit more than I know. Okay? We call this a substantive audit process. 2 sorts of audit processes we have in ISACA: a non-substantive or compliance process. The auditor does not necessarily have to be a subject matter expert. The auditor is merely checking if a control exists. They don't really understand the environment in detail. They don't really understand the business in detail. They don't really understand the control in detail. A non-substantive or compliance audit. A compliance audit passes or fails. And there are lots of reasons to do compliance audit. You would never want a substantive audit for something like PCI DSS. PCI DSS is a standard required for the payment industry, and it requires you to get a badge to pass an audit, to jump through some hoops to prove you have a limited amount of security. A substantive audit process is one where the auditor truly is a subject matter expert. The auditor understands the business, the implementation environment, it understands the organization's strategic objectives, the auditor understands the business objectives. The auditor has a good understanding of controls and the right controls, and they can offer a really good opinion on whether or not the control actually delivers what the business requires. They really are a subject matter expert with a lot more depth and a lot more detail. In ISACA, we say there's a place for both types of audit, but the internal audit process, which ISACA is mainly aimed at, should really be a substantive process. We want that subject matter expert, that authority to be an auditor. So, huge amount of work for the auditors. Audit is all about delivering assurance that the business objectives are going to be met, and the budget allocated is going to be spent in a value for money way to manage risk. Delivering an audit is all about delivering a repeatable, trusted process. The auditor therefore must be independent, trustworthy, and must be a subject matter expert on process. You see, as an auditor, my subject matter expert is the process. I always audit a process. I never really audit an IT system or a single control. What I'm really auditing is the process that the controls are assigned against. It's what we call system thinking. It's the idea that we've got people, process, and systems. It's the process that we're an expert in, but we audit across the whole three different areas: people, process, and system. Some answer rules. These are not going to answer exam questions, but they give you the principles that you apply to help you pick the right answer. For example, if we asked you a question and it says, you think you found this, you might have found this, the auditor might have found fraud. The auditor thinks they found a compromise. The auditor thinks they found a control missing. There might be a gap in security. There could be a hole. All those words, might, should, maybe, none of them are definitive. An auditor always looks for definitive evidence. So one of the best rules I can give you is, what do? Look for more evidence. I only form a conclusion based on the evidence that I have gathered. If I have not got enough evidence, I gather more evidence. And if I still haven't got enough evidence, guess what? I gather more evidence. I need to base my decisions on the evidence that I've obtained and nothing but the evidence. Everything that we find within a process, all the controls, should be based on the principles of risk management. We should look at the risk, we should look at vulnerabilities and threats. There should have been a risk analysis and a risk assessment carried out as part of a risk management program. So we need to understand that process and we need to audit the risk principles. One of the things that we have in an audit is we always want to see the business winning. The business is always right. We very rarely say no. Now, of course, we've got a little problem. One of the things that we have to say no for is compliance. Compliance is complying with the law. Do you remember earlier on? We say the business needs compliance. Therefore, compliance is something we're allowed to say, no, you can't do that because it breaches Data Protection Act and the organization has created a strategy, an objective that says we must be compliant with the law. You can always assume that we're going to be compliant with the law, but apart from that one exception, the business is always right. So if the business wants to do something and there's business reasons for it, we try to manage the risk in a cost-effective, efficient way, but ultimately the business must win. Think about it. What the hell's the point of having a highly secure network if we didn't make any profit last year? There's no point at all. No profit, no business. The business might survive an attack, it might survive a major incident, it might survive a crisis, but it won't survive making a loss for very long at all. Okay, so that's why we're saying the business ultimately wins, because it's about making profit. Everything we do in IS is therefore to deliver higher profitability, quicker results, better stakeholder shareholder return. Every process we look at needs to be verified. So we walk through the entire process spanning the people, the process itself, and the systems that implement the process. For example, in audit, software development is a big topic with numerous exam questions. I mean, we know that most vulnerabilities, technical vulnerabilities, come from badly written code. So therefore, if we can write better code, we can reduce the number of vulnerabilities. If we reduce the number of vulnerabilities, we can reduce the risk. If we can reduce the risk by reducing the number of vulnerabilities, we can reduce the operating budget and the overall cost to the business. You need to understand software development in quite a shocking level of detail. And I've read plenty of books on CISA. And in this topic, in software development, there's only one book that you can go to, and it's not the one you want me to say. It's the official ISACA candidate guide. So the CISA candidate guide, the official ISACA book, it's still available to purchase on the website. I think also Amazon sells it. But the official green book this year, okay, you have to read things like development out of it. It is extremely specific. There are all sorts of very specific controls. You really do need to memorize them off. One of the little rules I can give you that's much easier to memorize off: automation always works best in audit. So if we want to automate an audit process, we might get the auditee involved in a controlled self-assessment, CSA, or we might use something like GAS, a generalized audit software. Okay, so a GAS system is an automatic way of doing an audit where we build audit right into the software we develop. You can see the software development coming back in again. So, you know, things like that are always rules. Automated audit always works best. So, the specials, you really need to know the tools of the trade. Okay? I was delivering a session in London about 3 weeks ago, and we had a fantastic, shall we call it conversation, inverted commas? You know what I mean, argument. And 1 hour, 45-minute argument about accuracy versus precision. Yes, it was a group of auditors I was with. Accuracy versus precision. That's the type of question that you're going to get nailed on the exam. And there's lots of those, isn't there? Quantitative versus qualitative analysis. Statistical and non-statistical sampling. Attribute and variable sampling. You really do need to know your measuring tools, your sampling, measuring, and reporting tools really quite well. Okay? Not to leave you on a cliff edge. I know you're just all sitting at the edge of your seats. Okay? The difference between accuracy and precision. Okay. Accuracy is how accurate we can measure something. If we're measuring a manufacturing process and it's producing a bolt, a B-O-L-T, a bolt, if we can measure it to 2 decimal places or 3 decimal places or 4 decimal places, that's the accuracy that we're trying to measure it to. How accurate is the reading? Is it 2 decimal places, 3 decimal places, or 4 decimal places? Precision is if we repeat the measurement several times on the one bolt, what are the ranges of results? So if we go and take our accurate 4 decimal place measure and we measure the one bolt 10 times, how many different readings? What's the spread of the population of the readings? So precision is about the repeatability of the accuracy. Bet you're glad you know that one. Okay, those are the things that are very hard to read in a book, but absolutely when you get words and terms like this within audit, you can virtually guarantee yourself questions on things like statistical versus non-statistical, attribute versus variable, precision versus accuracy. There's a whole lot of them. Also, technical details and controls do come up. Software. Maybe it's just my opinion, but I feel that the technical controls in CISA are skewed towards development. The technical controls in CISM are skewed towards operational. Operational controls are things like firewalls, IDSs, and IPSs. Development controls are things like agile, spiral, waterfall, and things like software QA, UAT testing, alpha and beta testing, tracing and mapping, tagging, all these different controls that we may use in a software development environment. And then don't forget the audit controls themselves. Of course, we're going to be auditors as CISAs. Typical CISA questions. This happens, what do you do next? Default answer, gather more evidence. If you've got enough evidence, report to management. management can also be represented by the audit committee. So if we make a finding based on evidence, we report it to senior management or we report it to the audit committee. So senior management, audit committee, the business is what we do next if we have evidence. If we don't have evidence, then we gather more evidence. Okay, we keep gathering evidence. How do you run an audit? Well, we need to define an audit universe. We need to have an audit plan, and each audit needs an audit scope. The audit universe is everything that we're going to audit. The audit scope is everything for this audit, and the audit plan is how we're going to deliver the entire audit universe. All those are approved by the audit committee. So we create them, but they're all approved by an audit committee who represent the business. There are lots of audit tools. We just talked about accuracy and precision. You'll be forced to make lots of decisions on how you go and measure things. Do you use CMM? Do you use a balanced scorecard? Is it accuracy or precision? Is it standardized mean or non-standardized mean? There's lots of audit tools you'll be asked to use. What measuring techniques? Same sort of question. And of course you get the control questions as well. What do you need, an IDS or an IPS? Most of the control questions though, they are software orientated. So you'll get very specific controls in the software domain. You'll also get DR controls as well. Warm sites, hot sites, RPOs, RTOs, that whole BCP DR piece. So, CISA. Okay, 1 hour, 18 minutes in, maybe 15. We might run 3 minutes over. Would you allow me to run 3 minutes over? Okay, let's go to the final little closeout, CISM. So, CISA was audit, CISM is management. The CISA is all about setting up and running a department. It's using a governance model for business management. We're doing project risk management, development and acquisition. We're managing operational risk. We're responsible for the incident process and incident handling. We're going to be BCP, BIA and DRP, business continuity planning, business impact assessment and disaster recovery planning. And there are a vast variety of controls. There's more controls on this one than there is on CISA. CISA is slightly skewed towards development, but it does cover other controls as well. The CISM definitely needs to know more controls, and it really is very tightly aligned with a CISSP. So if you want to get an idea of the types of control questions, if you just Google CISSP or CISSP revision, I'm sure you'll find some resources on the internet. Those type of control details are what we need to understand. CISM, well, everything we do in an IS department needs to be measured. And we manage the system by translating business objective requirements into measurable results when managing risk in a cost-effective way. We've got a word for it. The word answers a load of exam questions. What's the phrase or the word? It's a phrase actually. Strategic alignment. Strategic alignment says that everything that we do helps to deliver business objectives. We deliver a repeatable, trusted service. The manager must be, the ISM, the Information System or Information Security Manager, must be a business leader, a subject matter expert. He must understand the whole business, its goals and objectives, and must be able to influence other people to deliver results. Everything that we do is about strategy and is based on a governance-led business. So we create our policies based on the organizational strategic objectives. Everything we implement is always implemented on the basis of risk analysis and risk assessment. Risk assessment is looking at individual risks. Risk analysis is taking the combined results of the individual risks and analyze them in our current environment. The risk program is the whole 9 yards, the whole system and process we use to do risk assessment and risk analysis. the same as the CISA. The business always wins, but for the business to be compliant, for the business to operate, we need to be compliant. We've one little rule. Don't do anything unless it can be measured. We know we cannot manage residual risk to zero. So getting zero risk is almost an impossibility. So no matter how many controls we implement, we operate in an environment where there still will be a significant, but hopefully acceptable, amount of risk. So because we know that risk exists, and because we know we can have a compromise, we can have a control failure, we can have an incident, we must make sure we've measured our progress to deliver the business goals. Measuring, producing evidence makes the auditors happy, and we like making auditors happy because auditors tell senior managers how good a job we're doing. Can you see the link between the audit and the CISM? Success is balanced protection measured by the audit. There's a good line for you. Success is balanced protection measured by the audit. That's something that you should literally, not actually, literally, tattoo in the back of your hand. I'll repeat that, not literally. Okay, so, don't come and find tattooed in the back of your hand. But success is balanced protection measured by the audit. Okay, I should put one of those disclaimers up. Please don't do this at home. Look, this is the sort of thing that's really useful to you remember before the exam. Success is balanced protection measured by the audit. That's maybe one of the most important lines that I have on all these slides for the CISM candidate. Success is balanced protection measured by the audit. The CISM specials, business tools. We really do go into the business tool, balanced scorecards, CMMIs, COSO, quality frameworks. There's an awful lot of business tools involved. Risk, it's the same thing, risk-based vulnerability management, where we look at each vulnerability and the risk it poses to the business. We prioritize our actions based on the risk that it presents to us in our live environment. It's a risk-based process. Technical details and controls, we've mentioned it several times. There are so many of them, it would be 5 days for me to even read a list out. What am I going to say? It's roughly equivalent to CISP. So if you want an idea of the type of controls and knowledge, look at some sort of CISP material. I get asked this after this session quite frequently. I didn't say this because ISACA shouldn't recommend other qualifications. Sorry guys. Look, personal opinion. If you were going to do these in an ideal way, you'd do CISP first, then you'd do CISA, then you'd do CISM. CISA and CISM go together. You need that control understanding. CISM and CISA are not very good at explaining the controls to you. We're more about the business applications of the controls you already know. So even if you're reading the official manual, which I'm sure lots of you have, it's not going to tell you all the controls you need. It might give you lists of them, but it does not explain them. It does not help you. If you haven't got any control experience, a lot of Wikipedia, a lot of Googling for CISP at this stage. Typical types of CISM question. What is the purpose of? So we can be asked questions that require you to know that the purpose of risk management is controlled risk while allowing business to succeed. What's the purpose of strategic objectives? To align the business so that everybody's pulling the same way. We get a lot of purpose questions. Define the role and responsibility. Well, here's a simple one. You need an ordered list of roles and responsibility. Watch out for the word ultimate. The minute that I stick the word ultimate, who is ultimately responsible? Who is ultimately accountable? The minute I stick the word ultimate into a statement, it changes the answer. If you've got ultimate, it's virtually always the executive management team. So watch out for that. Ultimate means as high as you can go up to 3. Roles and responsibilities, the default one we have is a Chief Operating Officer has got a Chief Information Officer reporting into them. The Chief Information Officer has a Chief Information Security Officer reporting into them. The Chief Information Security Officer has an Information Security Manager reporting into them. So the bottom of the pile we get ISM, Information Security Manager. One step up at C level, we get the CISO. One step up from a CISO, we get the CIO. One step up for the CIO, we get the COO. Okay, again, you don't have to have all these roles, but these are the roles that we want you to know about the acme.com company, the stereotypical company your question's going to be on. 3's nice and easy. You need to go over all your risk calculations and your risk principles. No excuse for getting risk questions wrong. It's a small domain. It's a tight number of topics. It's easy to revise. Lots of what control question. What type of control would? Now, don't fall into the trap. You know the old saying, ask a technical person a question, get a technical answer. Not all controls have to be technical. We like people doing things. We trust people doing things. We like auditors to create audit trails. Audit trails can be handwritten. There's an awful lot of trust within controls. Other controls are always going to be generic. Controls like segregation of duty, need to know, and need to do. These are the controls that are the most fundamental controls we have: a segregation of duty, a need to know, and a need to do. So it's not always technical controls. It could be physical, it could be administrative, or it could be technical. So always make sure you're not concentrating just on technical controls. It could be about contract management for third-party outsourcing. So you'll get cloud and third-party outsourcing questions. How do you secure the cloud? How do you secure a third-party service contract? Both of them are contract agreements. We do contractual obligations. We put everything in the contract. We manage it using the contract. Some measurement questions. How do you measure a gap? How do you measure compliance? How do you measure risk? You'll definitely get some measurement questions. You'll also get some really strange ones. Best, worst, first, last. You'll get a word in bold and it'll say, which is the best thing? Which is the worst thing? Which is the first thing you do? Which is the last thing you do? It gets really annoying, these first, best, worst, last questions, because if there's 10 things in a list in the official manual, the list will always be in order. It'll always be in order, and they'll never give you the first thing in the list. They won't give you the second thing on the list. They won't give you the third thing. They might not even give you the fourth thing in the list. They'll ask you, what should you do first? And the option that you pick is the fifth, because the 4 options on the exam are the 5th option, the 7th option, the 9th option, and the 10th option. So out of the 4 options you're given, you're not always picking the one you would do first. You're picking the first one out of that list. Sometimes when I ask you which of the following is the best option, you're not going to get the best answer. You might get your 3rd or 4th choice of answer. But it's the best in the list that they've given you. Now, these are where they make the questions really difficult. This is why you really genuinely need to revise the material first. You need to understand the material you're revising. You need to learn the material off. And then you need to practice. One hour, 31 minutes into our 1 hour, 30-minute presentation. We're slightly over. We'll close out in the next 3 or 4. Look, some basic things about the exam day, and then we'll do a final conclusion. I'll give you some last-minute hints and tips. Look, the exam day, we will close the door of the exam center at 8:30 sharp. Sorry, I nearly said 4:30. No, we won't. It's 8:30 sharp. You have to be inside the front door 15 minutes before that, the very latest. If you turn up 5 seconds past 8:30, you are not getting in. The door will be shut. You will not get in. You will not sit your exam. If you're inside the door at 8:30 and you've got your government-issued photographic ID, you will be allowed to sit the exam. So once you're inside that front door, we have to make sure we allow you to sit the exam. Once you've got the foot in the door, the only mistake you can make is not bringing your government-issued photographic ID. If you left in a car, you still have to be back by 8:30. There are no exceptions to this. There will be no exception. Please make sure you bring your government-issued photographic ID. Don't take anything into the exam hall. You will not be allowed virtually anything at your desk. So leave it in the car, leave it at home. You don't need your mobile. You don't need your handbag. You don't need a rucksack. Leave it all outside the exam hall. Don't bring it in. The only thing you should really have with you are 3+ pencils, an eraser, a high quality eraser. If I said to you a plaster-sized eraser, would that be too much detail? Do you know those white, soft plastic erasers? That's what I'm talking about. Your ID, and if possible, bring your admission card. If you forget your admission card, we can look up your number, but we can't do it without your ID. I'd strongly recommend, get a good breakfast before you come. It's a 4-hour exam. You should wear a jacket or a fleece, something you can take off or put on easily. We asked organisations to volunteer the use of their facilities. Their facilities are usually colleges or universities, and it's usually the official exam hall. You might be in front of a roasting hot radiator. You might be right under an air conditioning unit. You might be in front of an open window with a breeze, or a closed window with the sun belting through. It's in there for 4 hours. The last thing you want to be is roasting hot or freezing cold. So bring layers, bring stuff that are easy to take off and put on. Take them off, put them in the back of your chair. You are not allowed water on your desk. We will not allow you to have water on your desk. Not a policy I agree with, but I must enforce the policy. Drink water before you start. If you need a drink during the event, please just raise your hand. There'll be plenty of very helpful proctors there. We will allow you to go to the front of the hall or the back of the hall. There'll be water provided. You will not be allowed to bring the water back to your desk. Why? You only get one answer sheet. If you spill water on your answer sheet, if you destroy your answer sheet, it's very difficult to provide you another one. You won't really get a second answer sheet. That's why we don't allow you to have water at your desk. You're allowed to take restroom breaks, whether you need one or not. After an hour and a half, 2 hours, put your hand up, let somebody come round, go for a restroom break. It gets you up for a walk, it gets some circulation going, it breaks up the monotony of the exam. So get up, walk about by taking a restroom break. By the way, you will have to sign out. Depending on the number of proctors, we usually only allow one male and one female out at a time. And you will be escorted as far as the restrooms. You will not be escorted into the restrooms, but you will be escorted as far as the restrooms. And when the exam starts, we do search the restroom facilities. Hey, we're auditors after all. There's no secret to answering these questions. If you read the internet, you'll get 1,000 different various methods, all guaranteeing to give you a better result on your CISA CISM exam. There's no magic way. You start at the start, you work your way through at the end, you double check everything as you go along. When you get to the end of the exam, you finish, you put your hand up, you're escorted out of the exam hall, you walk out. Do not go over all your questions. Do not go over all your questions. If you go over your questions, you will change more right answers into wrong answers than you will change wrong answers into right answers. This is a scientifically validated fact. The percentage is 2/3. You change 2/3 of right answers into wrong answers during a post-exam review. When you get to the end of the exam, call over the proctor, check that you've put your name on it, check you put your ID number on it, get up and walk out. Before you walk out, you have to answer the questions. Here's some of my little hints and tips. I don't try to pick the right answer. I find that doesn't work in an ISACA exam because there literally is always 4 right answers. So I pick the 2 most wrong answers first. I eliminate the 2 most incorrect. That leaves me a 50-50. I then reread the question. I use the basic principles that we've used during this session to help me pick which of the 2 answers I've left with is right. I pick it, I answer it, I put it on my answer sheet there and then. I go back, I double check that I got the right answer, and I move on. I keep moving forward, I never think back, I never worry about the question that I've done. It's in the past, it's over with, I don't come back to it. Trust me folks, I've put well over 250 people through this exam over the last 6 years. You don't go back over your questions. Genuinely don't do it. You think that I've got to try to make a point here? Okay, it's not a 4-hour exam. You will have time left at the end. Don't check your answers. When you're finished, leave. I double check my answers before I leave each question. Double check it before you move on. But once you've double checked it, be confident at the end you're finished. You won't know if you've passed or failed. There's no way will you think you've passed this exam. You won't know you've failed it. You've got an agonizing 6 weeks or longer wait to get the results. So be prepared for that long, agonizing wait. 1 hour 39 minutes into our 1 hour 30-minute presentation. Folks, what I've tried to do is to give you some hints, some tips, some principles that I've learned over the years with helping many hundreds of people get through these exams. The only thing that passes this exam is hard work, and the hard work needs to be done now. If you haven't even opened a book, there is still time, but you have a serious amount of work. I would estimate an average exam candidate does 200 to 300 hours study for this exam. And I'm not exaggerating. I genuinely believe the average candidate would need to do 200 to 300 hours study for this exam. It is difficult. It is hard. We want to make it hard. We don't want everyone to pass. We want only the best, only the most committed, only the ones that are willing to put the most effort in. We do not want everybody in the world to be a CISA or CISM. We want the elite few, the ones that are willing to make that little extra effort to put in a little bit more at the last hurdle. Folks, I want to thank you for tonight for attending. I hope some of what I've done has been useful to you. Okay, I'm going to go down the left-hand side for some questions. Everett is online as well from the committee. Hi Everett, how are you? Okay, poor Everett's attended more of these than he cares remember. Okay, he's getting therapy at the moment. Okay, only joking. Okay, there's a little note down the left side. If you need your CPEs, if you're already an ISACA member, this is worth some CPEs. Okay, so your CPEs can be got by emailing certification@isaca.ie. You can actually, yes. Okay, I'm sure we could help out our CISP buddies So of course Everett will be able to give you some sort of receipt to say you attended. Good point, Mark. I never actually remembered about that one. But yes, of course, you can claim your CISP points for this one. I can actually claim my CISP points for delivering it, my ISACA points for delivering. Folks, any other questions about the topics, the exam, anything myself or Everett can help you with, down the left-hand side. Unfortunately, Everett has also made available the certification at ISACA.ie email address, so you're more than welcome to use that as well. Yes, we will also distribute the presentation in PDF format, and we will attempt to make a recording of this work. I'm using the Microsoft Skype for Business platform. The session is being recorded, so hopefully when I end the session, I will get a recording. If we do get a recording, we'll probably put it up on the site. It'll also probably be on LinkedIn and our Twitter feed as well. Any other questions? Any other help down the side, folks? Now, somebody said at the start of the exam, and I do usually, I forgot my closing slide. My closing slide is normally so long and thanks for all the fish. So a bonus point question down the left. Where does so long and thanks for all the fish come from? Closing question. Where does so long and thanks for all the fish come from? Anyone care to pop an answer down the left in the conversation bar? I'll let you go if you get the right answer. Multi-Python. We'll give you a negative on that one. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Very good. A couple answers coming through. Working now. Don't worry about the exam when it comes to the day. If you do the work at this stage, you will be able to achieve a pass. You'd be surprised the number of people that walk in with virtually no prep to these exams. Put the work in, you will. I wish you every best on the 13th. 6 weeks later when you get results. So for now, so long and thanks for all the fish.